drop and give me 25. I'm the gunny.
It's time for the gunny.
The quarter deck. Lights. Get online right now. You got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hello, my bunch of knuckle-dragging, beer-drinking, hard-charging devil dogs. You're listening to The Quarter Deck. I am your host, Miguel, the Gunny Signs.
Get out the bus!
I do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another episode here of A Quarter Deck. I am Miguel, the Gunny Signs, and this week we're going to go ahead and we're going to continue our discussion that we started last week, talking about disability compensation and your eligibility. How do you know if you're eligible to apply for disability compensation? So we're going to go into a little bit more detail with that this week. We're also going to move on and we're going to continue with our reading of our book, No Better Friend, No Worst Enemy, with the 1st Marine Division in Iraq in 2003. Our book is starting to get a lot more interesting, and we're starting to actually develop the actual planning phase of what the division did in order to get themselves ready and prepared to actually head into Iraq in 2003. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Quarter Deck with Miguel, the Gunny Signs. And last week we started talking a little bit more about our VA benefits and everything that we've been going through. But in particular, we started talking about VA disability compensation and the benefit and how you, as an active duty service member about to get out of the service, or a veteran that has been out of the service, how are you going to be able to actually benefit from this benefit if you are eligible to get that? But that brings up a great question. How do I know if I am eligible for VA disability benefits? And that's a question that a lot of veterans and a lot of service members ask themselves, because they're like, I'm not even going to be qualified for this, so why the heck do I even want to apply for these things? And, and this is, my opinion, it's from my own experience and stuff like that, that what I've came to see is that if you don't even take the opportunity or give yourself a chance to apply for any of these benefits, how are you going to know if you're actually eligible to qualify for all these benefits that we've been discussing here the past couple of weeks? So it's a good question. It's a valid question that you're going to ask yourself, because how are they going to even determine your eligibility for these things? Okay, so it's very, very difficult to understand these things sometimes. And a lot of individuals, start thinking too far into it, and it makes them believe that they're not even going to be eligible to actually do these things. Okay, but as far as eligibility goes, what is the VA going to actually do? Well, they're going to actually review the VA disability benefits eligibility criteria to find out if you are going to be able to actually get disability compensation for any illness or injury that was caused by or has gotten worse because of your active duty military service. And what this is this compensation may include financial support and other benefits like health care that you're going to be eligible to be receiving from the VA. Now, also, with VA healthcare, that's going to bring up a whole bunch of other questions. And that's going to be a whole nother week or two, maybe 3, where we're going to go into talking a little bit more about actual VA healthcare. Okay, so here's the big question. Am I eligible for VA disability compensation? Okay, now you may be eligible for this disability compensation, and you got to meet some criteria. And the way it states on here, and all the information and all the facts that I'm getting them straight from va.gov. So make sure that you remember that is your go-to website. If you have any questions, any concerns, or you want to look up any type of information regarding any of the benefits that we have been talking about, go to va.gov. Make sure you log in so you're able to access your own account with all your information, everything that's uploaded on there. So just in case you want to go ahead and do an application, that information is going to be already uploaded there for you. So big question again, am I eligible for VA disability compensation? Now here's the 2 criteria. Now, both of these have to be true. 1, you have to have a current illness or injury that is known as a condition by the VA that affects your mind or body. And you have to have served on active duty for training, or inactive duty training. So in other words, that kind of pertains to our reservists. to make sure that they understand that they are eligible for this stuff as well. However, it has to have happened when they're activated, whether it's on their weekend drill or whenever they're doing their monthly during the summer, whatever the heck they must do. Okay. Now, at least one of these statements must also be true for the eligibility for the compensation. First one is that you got sick or injured while serving in the military. Well, that's a no-brainer, right? Because military service members are the only ones that can actually apply for disability compensation. And that you can link this condition of your illness or injury that is called an in-service disability claim, okay? Or you had an illness or injury before you joined the military and serving made it worse. That is called a precise disability claim. And we talked about that last week, about the different types of conditions, the way that the VA looks at them to determine them to be service-connected conditions. You have to have a disability related to your active duty service that didn't appear until after you ended your service. That is called a post-service disability claim. So there's different types of things that you're going to have to do, okay? Now, some of the presumed actual disabilities that the VA is going to look at, and these are the things that are actually, that have been there for a while. These includes a chronic condition, something that's long-lasting, okay? An illness that appears within 1 year after discharge, or an illness caused by contact with contaminants, toxic chemicals, or other hazardous materials, or an illness caused by your time spent as a prisoner of war or POW. Not too many of those in the last past couple of years. But one of the main things that, if you listen and to what they say, is any kind of exposure caused by contaminants, toxic chemicals. I don't know how many different types of MOSs there are in the military, especially in the Marine Corps. That's your military occupation specialty, where you are actually exposed to a lot of different elements that can be hazardous. And, later on in life, those things can actually be causes of some kind of either cancer or diseases that are caused by those things. And I don't know about you guys, but if you guys been paying attention a lot, there's been a lot of commercials now regarding the water contamination back in the 80s, back in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And I mean, that is something that's been going on for years and years and years. It's just now that with all those different illnesses and different types of cancers that have actually been identified as being a result of that water contamination down there on that base, that makes more individuals eligible for the disability compensation benefit that the VA has to offer. So that's another thing that you have to take a look at. And one of the big things right now is, especially for all these service members that were part of the OIF, OEF campaigns and stuff like that, the fire pits. There is a fire pit registry that the VA has that I've always told every service member that has gotten out, and even veterans that haven't even bothered to take a look at that stuff, enroll into that fire pit registry, because they're continuing to do studies about causes, that things that occurred because you were inhaling so much of that smoke from all those burn pits when you were down there in Iraq or in Afghanistan. And it's going to be a big deal. That's going to be something that allows them to say, hey, yes, they're registered on here. And as well as your DD-214 is going to let them know, say, hey, they were in that area during the time when all these things actually happened. Okay. Now, who's actually covered by this? Of course, veterans, and there's qualified dependents that can also qualify for some of these benefits dealing with disability compensation, because that they're going to be able to get other benefits because of the disabilities of their veteran that they're going to be able to actually use. Okay. Now, here's another big question. We have so many service members that get out of the service, and I don't know what it is in the last number of years, because this is included back when I was still in active duty service. A lot of service members, especially our young ones, are getting out of the service with something other than an honorable discharge. And for the life of me, I don't understand, because you sign a contract, you fulfill your commitment, and you get out with an honorable discharge, and it's easy. You just simply do what you're told, and you get out. But there's so many that actually do get out without an honorable discharge, and therefore they're not able to apply for some of these benefits. So there's something, what can you actually do if you don't get an honorable discharge? Let's say you got a bad conduct or a dishonorable discharge. Okay, if you receive one of these discharges status, you may not be eligible for VA disability benefits. But what can you do? is there anything that you can do to actually help you to possibly apply for these benefits? Okay. And you can do that here on va.gov because you can actually put in for an upgrade to your discharge to hopefully get it upgraded to the level where it actually allows you to be able to actually apply for your disability compensation. So that's going to be something that, you know, that a lot of service members and veterans that have gotten out that can actually look and see if they're eligible to apply for that upgrade. And like we talked about last week, what they're going to do is that the VA is going to go ahead and upgrade your status up one level. Okay, they're not going to take you from a bad chronic discharge all the way to an honorable discharge. That's not what's going to happen, but they're going to elevate you at least one level to allow you to possibly, you know, qualify for some of these other benefits that you cannot have because of the type of discharge that you've gotten when you got out. And a lot of individuals that have done this, you know, there's a lot of people that have gotten out of the service with either a other than honorable condition or honorable under honorable conditions or whatever, different types of mixtures of discharges that they gotten out of. And maybe it wasn't just, or there just wasn't enough evidence that they can use because of their medical condition or whatever. And that's just the kind of discharge they got, especially for all these service members that are being administratively separated. Most of them are getting out without an honorable discharge. They're getting out with different types of discharges, and that directly affects the types of benefits that they're going to be eligible to actually apply for. Okay. Now, how do you actually file this thing? That's one of the bigger questions that I get too. Now, like I mentioned to you guys before, I worked as a VA benefits advisor aboard the air station, and I taught the separations classes, all the separations briefs for the VA for almost 7 years before I stopped working. And a lot of individuals, you know, nowadays depend a lot on computers and stuff like that. You can file a claim many different ways. You can file it online on va.gov. You can actually do everything online digitally, submit everything digitally, and the VA will get your claim instantly. You can also fill out the paper copies. All the paper copies fill everything out, where you're going to have to actually list all the different types of disabilities that you're planning on claiming throughout your claim. And then after that, any other types of proof, any other evidence that you may have. But the most important thing is, like we talked about, is that you have to have all the evidence that you're possibly going to need in order for you to submit this claim. So all of your medical records. So it's very, very important for you to have these things in order for you to actually submit this thing all at once and for it to actually be able to get processed as soon as possible. So that's going to be the ultimate goal. And remember last week we talked about the different types of claims that you can actually file. We talked about the benefits delivery of discharge claim or the BDD claim. We talked about those. Okay. And for all of you that are still on active duty about to separate, if you are within that time frame that we talked about 180 to 90 days. If you're within that time frame, you can submit that benefits delivery of discharge claim, that BDD claim, and be able to have all your medical appointments prior to you separating from the service. So that's very important, and that's a big thing, especially for you now that you're getting out of the service. All right. So again, remember, va.gov is your go-to site for you to be able to go to get all this information and actually apply for your disability compensation on there and get started with that to make sure that you're good. Okay. So you need to have that and everything to make sure you're ready to go. And also remember that there is no time limit for you to submit a disability claim. You do not have to submit it as soon as you're getting out because you just have to. There is no time frame. However, I always tell everybody, if you're going to submit a claim after you get out of the service, make sure that you do it within a year of you getting out of the service, because if you do it within that year, they will backdate your claim to the day after you got out of the service. If you do it anytime after that, so let's say you wait 5 years after you get out of the service, then they're only going to backdate it to the day that they receive your application, and you will get compensated all that back pay to that time frame. So that's one of the main things that you have to understand, that if you don't have all the evidence and everything that you need before you're getting out of the service, you don't have to submit the claim just because you have to submit it. That's not the way that it works. It is always better for you to have all the evidence there as soon as you submit this claim, so that way you can submit everything at one time and you don't have to worry about anything. Everything is there. And of course, if the VA is going to need any more additional evidence, that's when they're going to go ahead and set up all your VA appointments, and they're going to reach out to any other medical facilities or anything else that you've gone to, and you weren't able to get certain documentation from them. but it's always better if you go to those facilities out in town in the civilian world and actually get all those documentations, all those medical records from all of those civilian doctors, and include that with your medical records when you submit your claim, because this way you're making less work for the VA because you're doing your part to make sure that you are ready to go and get all this stuff submitted, and then you're good. All right. So now let's go over a couple of conditions that are covered by disability compensation. Now, understand that there's thousands and thousands of different things that you can submit as far as for disability compensation. There is nothing that you cannot put on there. Okay. These are your injuries that you know what's going on. You know, if you have the evidence to prove that these things occurred and there were no issues prior to you coming into the service, you can go and put them on there. Now, these are just some of the conditions that I'm going to go over, but these are some of the ones that may make you eligible for disability compensations with the VA. One is a chronic, so a long-lasting back pain resulting in current diagnosis of back disability. Okay, so that's kind of a common sense one, but back pain is a big one because a lot of individuals that get out of the service, especially in the Marine Corps, we suffer from back pain. Any kind of breathing problem that is a result from a current lung condition or a lung disease, that can also be included on there. Severe hearing loss, that's a huge one. And so many individuals in the service have hearing loss. You can put that on there as a claim. Scar tissue, believe it or not, if you have scars, you can claim that on your disability claim, and the VA will compensate you for the scars that you have gotten since the time that you've been into the service. So they'll have that stuff for you. Any loss of range of motion, okay, joints and stuff like that, elbows, knees, your hips, things like that. If you've lost some range of that motion, they will measure that with a little protractor and make sure that you have the motion you're supposed to have. If not, that can be something that can be put in there for disability compensation. Any kind of ulcers or anything like that, or cancers that are caused by contact with any kind of toxic chemicals or any other dangers and stuff like that that they may have. Okay. Now, a couple other ones include traumatic brain injuries or TBIs that are on there, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, and anxiety. All those things are on there. So it's not just physical disabilities, but if there's anything dealing with any kind of like emotional or stuff like that, that can be also included on your VA disability claim for you to be able to submit the claim and have that stuff and everything else that you have. All right, so that's basically what we're going to talk about this week here for disability compensation. Next week, we'll go into a little bit more detail of actually how to fill out the form and how you get it submitted, and that way the VA can get it as soon as possible and get your claim processed as soon as they can. The Quarterdeck is brought to you by Miguel Science Photography. From the beginning of your family to the first birthday and beyond, whether it's a retirement or a Marine Corps ball, Miguel Science Photography is there to make memories that will last a lifetime. Miguel Science Photography is a certified veteran-owned business. Contact them at miguelsciencephotography.com.
What we're gonna do right here is go back. Way back into time.
It is time for us to get into our book regarding our 1st Marine Division, No Better Friend, No Worst Enemy. If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Quarterdeck. I am Miguel, the Gunny Signs, and this week we're going to head and move on, and we're going to talk about the new concept for combat service support that the 1st Marine Division had planned out to be able to support all the units in the front line as they made their way from Kuwait into Iraq and all the way towards Baghdad to get there in the fastest way possible and be able to actually support all of the different units in the different divisions that they were actually going to be assigned to support, and whatever RCT team they were assigned to make sure that they received all the supplies and everything that they needed. So let's go ahead and talk about that new concept for Combat Service Support Group and see how it all plays out. Throughout the early planning of the preparation phase, the G-Force worked with the 1st FSSG and its Brigade Service Support Group 1, BSSG 1, which later became Combat Service Support Group 11, or CSSG 11, for wartime operations in support of the division. Together, they developed Agile Capable Combat Service Support, or CSSS units. The challenge was to provide a logistical element with shared situational awareness with the supported commands, which could proactively calculate logistical needs and have them out the door before a unit even registered a request. So that's the way it was supposed to go. But I'm going to tell you guys, from actually being there, it was a freaking nightmare. It was a nightmare to getting all the supplies that we actually needed, from water, chow, all the way up to ammo. It was a pain in the butt to get all that stuff. But hey, learning, right? You learn. Hopefully you don't make the same mistake again. The BSSG-1 staff of 32 Marines, commanded by Colonel J.J. Pomfret, would form the nucleus of the new CSS organization. They understood the logistics would be the critical link to keep the 1st Marine Division moving without an operational pause. Logistics had to be mobile enough to keep up with the rapidly advancing force and flexible enough to meet changing missions. It was important that the CSS units execute as a maneuver element and be fully integrated into the 1st Marine Division. 1st FSSG's answer to the challenge was a light, fast-moving, highly capable combat service support company, CSSC, in direct support of each RCT. CSSCs would answer the RCT staffs for sustainment and maneuver in concert with the RCT's combat trains. They planned to carry food, water, fuel, and ammunition packages tailored to the RCT's mission. So they plan to have all that stuff with them to support every single RCT. Now, for those of you guys that didn't join us from the beginning, remember that I'm an artilleryman, so we were part of the 1st Marine Division, and we had the whole 11th Marine Regiment supporting the division as we moved from Kuwait into Iraq. And I'm going to tell you guys, the ammunition was scarce. There was a time that we had completely ran out of high explosive rounds, and we had to use what we had in order to actually advance, because we were moving so fast that they had a hard time keeping up with us and keeping the supply train, close to where we were, because we were moving that fast from Kuwait, heading over all the way over to Baghdad. So supporting the CSSGs was Combat Service Support Battalion 10, CSSB 10, which kept an additional 3 of 5 days of supply on hand and was maneuverable enough to keep up with the rapid pace of the battle. I don't think so. Tying the two together was the headquarters of CSSG 11. They were the critical link coordinating logistical requirements from the division and ensuring the replenishment of the CSSCs and the CSSB 10 by the rest of the FSSG. For the first time in recent history, the 1st Marine Division would fight with its own integrated CSS, and the division embraced the new CSS element as part of its own task. Organized by Colonel Pomfret, was considered a maneuver commander of the division, and its staff was thoroughly integrated. The family building approach was the model for all elements of working with Blue Diamond. From embedded reporters to bridge companies, everyone who was going into the fight with 1st Marine Division was made part of an extended and tightly integrated family. So, as you guys can see, there was a lot of planning that went into this, the divisions and the supporting groups that were going to be able to supply all of the supplies and everything that the division was going to need in order to get them into Baghdad. Now, everybody knows that you can plan everything you want and it looks great on black and white and it looks awesome on paper. But when you actually get on the ground and you physically start doing these things, things always go to crap. And you have to have a plan for a plan for a plan in order to make things work. And, that's just what you have to do. So you have to make it work. So, great planning to get all this stuff put together and stuff and everything. But, when the division is moving so fast from point A to point B, sometimes it can get a little bit complicated to replenish these units and actually get them to keep up with the units as fast as they're moving in the battlefield. And that's just something that I'm sure that it wasn't just during this time, during OAF and OIF down there in 2003. And I'm sure that in other battles, in other conflicts, it was probably the same kind of situation, that a lot of individuals, didn't have the right equipment that they needed, or the ammo, the supplies. things that they needed while they were in that common environment.
The quarter deck.
There are so many things that we can talk about when it comes to VA benefits, and this week was no different. We went into more detail and talked about the disability compensation process, what makes you eligible, what you have to have in order for you to actually be eligible to apply for those things, and, you know, kind of squash a little bit of the attitude that I hear all the time regarding that. Why should I even apply for this thing? They're going to deny me everything anyway. And hey, remember, you need to apply. If you don't apply, you're never going to know. You're not going to understand if they're going to make you eligible and you're going to be ready to receive the compensation of that tax-free monthly payment that can help you, your family, because of the time that you spend in the service. So again, apply. Let them determine your eligibility and whether it is a service-connected condition or not. Next week, we're going to go ahead and move into talking about the actual application process and some of the information and the things that you're going to need in order for you to actually apply for the disability compensation. Our book, No Better Friend, No Worst Enemy, is starting to get so much better. And it's hard to believe that all this planning that they had for the service support group to get all the stuff to the division in place. But like any plan, things change. And that's the same thing that happened to them. Next week, we're going to continue on with our reading of our book, but we're going to move on and we're going to talk about how the division actually planned for casualties that could and would happen in the next couple of months when the division was fighting over there in Iraq. Thank you for joining us this week here on our podcast, The Quarter Deck. It is greatly appreciated to see all of you returning back and all the downloads that I have been noticing on our application. And remember, our podcast is now available on all podcasting applications. All you simply got to do is do a Google search on Google for The Quarter Deck with Gunny Signs, and it will show you all the different podcasting applications that you're able to actually listen to the podcast on. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you to all of you who have been returning every single week. And remember that we are also available on Facebook on The Quarter Deck with Gunny Signs for our video podcasting that we do there once a week as well, to be able to actually interact a little bit more with you guys. So until next week, this is Miguel, the Gunny Signs, sounding Liberty Call.
Get out the bus!
I do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.